Julia felt her stomach churn the moment the iron gate opened. St. Helens Manor stretched before her like a movie set, with its tree-lined avenues, immaculate gardens, and a main house that looked more like a colonial mansion. The navy blue dress she had chosen with such care suddenly seemed too simple, too common. Raphael held her hand as he drove down the cobblestone driveway. His smile, the same one that had captivated her 6 months ago when he brought his injured golden retriever to the clinic where she worked, still made her feel butterflies in her stomach. But now, there was something more. Nervousness, fear. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her fingers quickly before returning his attention to the steering wheel. "My mother is going to love you." Julia forced a smile. In the 3 months since Raphael had proposed to her, he had only mentioned his family in passing. She knew they were landowners in rural California, that they had coffee and cattle export businesses. But it was only when she received the invitation printed on letterhead for the engagement party that she understood the true dimension of what the word family meant to the Almeidas. The C parking lot was already full. Mercedes, BMWs, a silver Porsche gleaming under the afternoon sun. Julia looked at her 10-year-old red Civic, parked next to Raphael's Audi, and wanted to disappear. "Breathe," she told herself. "You saved the lives of dozens of animals this week. You can survive a party." But as they got out of the car and started walking toward the gardens where the party was taking place, Julia realized that this would be much more than just a celebration. The women wore designer dresses, shoes that cost more than 3 months of her rent. The men chatted, in groups discussing investments and business with the natural ease of those born into that world. And then she saw her. Mrs. Beatrice Almeida. Raphael's mother was an elegant woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a pearl necklace that must have been worth a fortune. Her blue eyes swept over Julia from head to toe in a fraction of a second, and in that look was everything she needed to know. "Raphael, dear," Beatrice said, kissing her son's cheek while keeping her eyes on Julia. "And this must be your fiancée." "Mom, this is Julia," Raphael said proudly. "Julia, my mother." "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Almeida," Julia said, extending her hand. The handshake was cold, quick, calculated. "A veterinarian, aren't you?" Beatrice asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. What a noble profession! There was something in the way she said noble that made Julia feel it was anything but. "I work at a clinic that treats stray animals," Julia explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "Many owners can't afford private treatment, so we offer free or reduced-cost services." "How admirable," Beatrice said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Raphael mentioned something about that. It must be gratifying to do volunteer work." "It's not volunteer work," Julia corrected, feeling the first pang of irritation. "It's my job. I'm employed by the clinic." "Ah, I see," Beatrice said, and that "I see" carried a silent judgment. "Well, enjoy the party. I have other guests to greet." And just like that, without another word, she turned and disappeared among the groups of people, leaving Julia with the clear sensation that she had just been evaluated and dismissed. "She's nervous," Raphael said, putting his arm around Julia's waist. "You know how mothers are. They always want the best for their children." Julia didn't answer. She wanted to believe him, but there was something in the way Beatrice had looked at her that went beyond maternal nervousness. The party was impressive. Tables covered with white linen tablecloths, floral arrangements that must have cost more than she earned in a month, waiters circulating with trays of champagne and sophisticated canapes. Julia accepted a glass just to have something to hold. Raphael was soon approached by acquaintances, men his age all wearing impeccable suits, talking about company mergers and international travel. Julia stood by his side, smiling politely, but feeling increasingly invisible. "And you, what do you do?" asked one of them, a tall, grey-haired man. "I'm a veterinarian," Julia replied. "Ah, how interesting," he said, with the same tone Beatrice had used. "And where did you study?" "At the University of California, Berkeley." "A public university," he said, as if that explained everything. "My son also studied veterinary medicine at UCLA, but he ended up going into agribusiness. Much more profitable, you know. Julia squeezed her glass tightly. I like what I do. Of course, the man said, already losing interest. Raphael, your father was telling me about the expansion of exports to Europe. And so the conversation turned to topics Julia neither understood nor had any interest in understanding. Raphael, absorbed in the discussion, didn't even notice when she drifted away. Julia wandered through the gardens, trying to find a secluded corner. She passed groups of women who stopped talking when she approached, their gazes following her with barely disguised curiosity. She knew what they were thinking. She knew what they were whispering as soon as she passed. It was on the side terrace that she found Raphael's sister. Caroline Almeida was 2 years older than her brother and possessed her mother's same aristocratic beauty. She was surrounded by a group of friends, all wearing designer dresses and glittering jewelry. Ah, the bride-to-be, Caroline said when Julia appeared. Girls, this is Julia, the vet. The way she said vet made the word sound ridiculous. Pleased to meet you, Julia said, forcing a smile. What a lovely dress, said one of Caroline's friends, with a smile that didn't hide the sarcasm. Is it vintage? Actually, I bought it at a downtown store, Julia replied, deciding that honesty was better than pretense. Downtown? Caroline repeated, exchanging glances with her friends. How authentic. The women laughed, a low, cruel sound. And tell me, Julia, Caroline continued, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. How did you two meet? I bet there's an interesting story. Raphael brought his dog to my clinic, Julia explained. Thor had gotten hurt during a walk. Ah, Thor, Caroline said, rolling her eyes. That spoiled dog. Raphael spends more on that animal than some people earn in a year. But I suppose you know that better than anyone, don't you? After all, you work with animals. I work saving animals, Julia corrected, feeling the anger begin to simmer. Animals that have been abandoned, abused, or whose owners can't afford treatment. How noble, Caroline said, echoing her mother's words. But tell me something. How much do you earn a month doing that noble work? The silence that followed was awkward. Caroline's friends waited, eager for the answer. Enough to pay my bills, Julia said, lifting her chin. I imagine so, Caroline said, taking a sip of champagne. After all, your bills must be quite different from ours. Where do you live again? Raphael mentioned something about a studio apartment in Silver Lake. It's a small apartment, yes, Julia said, feeling her cheeks flush. But it's mine. I pay for it with my own money. How independent, said one of the friends, and again that tone of barely disguised mockery. Caroline took a step forward, her eyes fixed on Julia with a disturbing intensity. Look, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty, she said, lowering her voice just enough for her friends to hear. My brother is a good man, a naive man even. He sees the best in people. But our family has responsibilities, traditions, expectations. I don't know what you're getting at, Julia said, though she knew exactly. I'm getting at the fact that you don't belong in this world, Caroline said bluntly. And if you truly love my brother, if you truly care about him, you'll recognize that and leave his life before it's too late. Julia felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Caroline's words echoed in her mind, raw and cruel. Who do you think you are to tell me that? She managed to say, struggling to keep her voice steady. I'm someone who knows my brother, someone who understands the world he lives in, Caroline said. And you frankly don't understand. You'll end up getting hurt, and worse, you'll hurt him too. Before Julia could respond, a familiar voice interrupted her. Julia, dear, you're here. It was Raphael, smiling as he approached. He had no idea what had just happened. Caroline immediately changed her posture, transforming the cold mask into a warm smile. We were just chatting, she said, kissing her brother's cheek. Getting to know our future sister-in-law better. Raphael put his arm around Julia, oblivious to the tension in the air. I hope Caroline is behaving, he said playfully. Always, Caroline replied, but her eyes fixed on Julia said something else, and as Raphael led her back to the party, Julia felt a weight settle in her chest. That night was just beginning, and she had a terrible feeling that the worst was yet to come. Dinner was served at a long mahogany table that seated over 50 people. Julia was positioned between Raphael and an uncle of his, a portly man named Maurice, who spoke loudly and drank red wine as if it were water. The conversation flowed around topics Julia could barely follow: real estate, investments, commodity market fluctuations, trips to exclusive resorts in the Hamptons and the Caribbean. She poked at the food on her plate, a filet mignon in wine sauce that was probably delicious, but which she could barely taste. "And you, Julia?" Maurice asked suddenly, turning to her with eyes already slightly glazed from drink. "Will your parents be able to come to the wedding? Raphael said they live in rural California." Julia swallowed hard. "They live in Bakersfield. My father is a mechanic and my mother works in a bakery." The silence that followed was brief but significant. She saw glances being exchanged along the table. "A mechanic," Maurice repeated as if savoring the word. "An honest profession. Very honest." "My father is the best mechanic in town," Julia said, lifting her chin. "He built his own workshop from scratch, and my mother makes the best cheese puffs you've ever tasted." "I'm sure," Maurice said, returning his attention to the wine. "Hard-working people. Very hard-working." Across the table, Julia saw Caroline whispering something to the woman next to her. Both looked in her direction and chuckled softly. Raphael, oblivious or pretending to be oblivious, chatted animatedly with his cousin about a fishing trip they planned to take in Alaska. Julia wanted to nudge him, make him see what was happening around them, but something stopped her. Pride, perhaps, or fear of appearing insecure. After dinner, the guests scattered again through the gardens and halls of the house. A live band played soft jazz while couples danced on the makeshift dance floor on the lawn. Raphael was pulled away by a group of friends, and before Julia could follow him, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Beatrice. "Dear, can we talk for a moment?" she said with a smile that didn't match the firmness of her touch. Julia found herself being guided into the house, through corridors decorated with expensive paintings and antique furniture, until they reached an office paneled in noble wood and shelves filled with leather-bound books. Beatrice closed the door behind them. "Please sit," she said, pointing to a leather armchair. Julia obeyed, more by reflex than by will. Beatrice walked to the window, watching the party outside for a moment before turning. "You seem like an intelligent young woman, Julia," she began. "That's why I'm going to speak frankly." "I prefer it that way," Julia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My son is the only male heir of the Almeida family," Beatrice continued. "When my husband retires, Raphael will take over the businesses, lands, companies, responsibilities that date back generations. Do you understand what that means?" "It means he'll have a lot of work," Julia said. Beatrice let out an impatient sigh. "It means he will need a wife who understands this world, someone who knows how to behave at dinners with international investors, who can represent the family at social events, who understands the nuances of business relationships." "And you think—" "I can't do that," Julia said, not as a question but as a statement. "It's not a question of capability," Beatrice said, sitting back down behind the office desk. "It's a question of origin. You were raised in a completely different world. Your values, your references, your way of seeing life. All of that is incompatible with what Raphael needs." Julia felt the anger burn in her chest. "Raphael loves me for who I am, not for where I was born or how much money my parents have." "Love, dear," Beatrice said with a condescending smile, "rarely survives practical differences. Raphael may find your simplicity charming now, but eventually it will become a burden. You will feel inadequate at every social event. You will feel excluded from conversations. You will begin to resent his world, and he will begin to resent your limitations." "I don't have limitations," Julia said, standing up. "I have a career I love, true friends, a life I built with my own hands. I don't need anyone's approval." "Ah, but you do," Beatrice said, also standing. "You need the approval of this family, because without it your marriage will be hell. Think about it, Julia. Think, if you really want to condemn my son to a life of family conflicts, to having to choose between you and all of us, that's not love. That's selfishness." The words hit Julia like arrows. She wanted to scream. She wanted to defend herself. But something in Beatrice's expression silenced her. There was a certainty there, an absolute conviction that she was right. "I'll think about what you said," Julia murmured finally, just to be able to leave the room. "I'm glad," Beatrice said, opening the door. "And Julia, this stays between us. There's no need to worry Raphael with difficult conversations, is there?" Julia didn't answer. She left the office with trembling legs and a heavy heart. She needed air. She needed space to think. She found refuge in the back garden, a more secluded corner where the party lights didn't reach with such intensity. She sat on a stone bench, hugging herself against the night's chill. "Don't cry," she told herself. "Don't give them that satisfaction." But the tears came anyway, not tears of sadness, but of anger. Anger at being judged, at being considered inadequate, at having her love for Raphael questioned as if it were a farce, a calculated plan to climb the social ladder. "Are you all right?" Julia looked up, startled. A woman approached, wearing an emerald green dress and a wool shawl over her shoulders. She was in her early 40s, with brown hair pulled back in an elegant bun and kind eyes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," the woman said, sitting next to Julia without asking permission. "I'm Helen, a distant cousin of the Almeidas. I saw you leaving the house looking like you needed a moment alone." "I'm fine," Julia lied, quickly wiping away her tears. Helen smiled with understanding. "You're not, and that's okay. This family can be overwhelming." Julia looked at her in surprise. "Your family?" "Technically, yes," Helen said, "but I was born on the poorer side. My mother was Beatrice's second cousin, so I grew up knowing these people but never truly being part of them. I know what it's like to be looked at as if you're inferior." "Why are you telling me this?" Julia asked. "Because I saw how they looked at you today," Helen said. "And because I've seen this story before. I've seen other women being crushed by this family. Good, intelligent women who truly loved, but who didn't have the right pedigree." "And what happened to them?" Julia asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "Some gave up and left. Others married anyway and spent miserable years, never being accepted, always being reminded that they weren't good enough." Helen paused. "None had a happy ending." Julia felt a tightening in her chest. "And what do you think I should do?" Helen gently took her hand. "I think you should talk honestly with Raphael. Not about what they said to you today, but about what really matters. Ask him if he's willing to stand up for you. Ask him if he's prepared to go against his family if necessary, and pay close attention to his answer." Before Julia could respond, voices approached. Caroline and two friends appeared around the bend in the garden, laughing too loudly. "Look at that," Caroline said when she saw them. "The bride-to-be ran off to cry? How dramatic." "Caroline, don't start," Helen said, standing up. "Relax, Helen," Caroline said, waving her hand dismissively. "We're just making an observation. After all, it must be difficult for her to be here, surrounded by so much wealth and success when her greatest achievement in life is vaccinating strays." Caroline's friends laughed, and Julia felt the anger begin to boil again. "At least I do something useful," Julia said, standing up too. "What do you do besides spend money that other people earned?" Caroline's smile disappeared. "How dare you?" "I dare because it's true," Julia said, taking a step forward. "You judge me for working to save lives, but what have you saved in your life? What difference have you made in the world? You think wearing Prada and having an important last name makes you superior, but I know people who live in shacks and have more dignity than you ever will." The silence that followed was tense. Caroline was white as a sheet, her eyes gleaming with anger. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Julia was already regretting it, not for having said it, but for having lost control, but it was too late to go back. Caroline turned and left, her friends following her like chickens behind their leader. Helen placed a hand on Julia's shoulder. "Well," she said with a sigh, "I think you just declared war." Julia looked at the night sky, stars twinkling above the trees. This wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But as she walked back to the party, looking for Raphael in the crowd, a part of her knew Helen was right. She had declared war. And now she would need to decide whether she was willing to fight or if it was better to just give up and leave. Raphael was talking to his father, a robust man with white hair whom Julia had been briefly introduced to at the beginning of the party. When she approached, both turned to look at her. "Julia," Raphael said, pulling her close. "Dad was telling me about a trip we took when I was a kid." Mr. Almeida nodded, but his eyes studied Julia with the same calculating intensity she had seen in Beatrice. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "Very much," Julia lied once again, and as Raphael continued to chat animatedly, oblivious to the storm brewing around him, Julia made a decision. She needed to talk to him. She needed to make him understand what was happening, but not there, not at that party, surrounded by people who hated her. She would wait until they got home. And then, finally, she would have the conversation that should have happened a long time ago. But fate had other plans for that night. It was almost midnight when the situation truly exploded. Julia was on the main terrace, trying to find a moment of peace, when she heard voices coming from the adjacent hall. One of them was Caroline's, loud and drunk enough not to care who might be listening. "She's pathetic," Caroline was saying. "Did you see the dress? She must have bought it at some department store, and those shoes. My God, they're hideous." Her friends laughed, and Julia recognized other voices joining the conversation. "But what does Raphael see in her?" one of the women asked. "The obvious," another voice replied, a male one this time. "She saw a golden opportunity and grabbed it with both hands. A poor vet marries the Almeida heir. It's like winning the lottery." "Exactly," Caroline agreed. "And the worst part is that my brother is too naive to realize. He actually believes she loves him, as if a woman who lives in a studio apartment and drives a Civic wouldn't be interested in money." Julia felt her cheeks burn. Her hands trembled with anger as she gripped the terrace balustrade tightly. "And she has that savior complex," Caroline continued. "Treats stray dogs as if she were Mother Teresa. It's so noble, so virtuous, it makes me sick." "Maybe she genuinely likes helping animals," a softer voice suggested, trying to be reasonable. "Please," Caroline retorted, "it's all a farce. She chose a profession that makes her seem altruistic to disguise the fact that she's a gold digger. I bet she's already planning how she's going to spend my brother's money." The laughter that followed was the limit. Julia couldn't hold back anymore. She turned and entered the hall, confronting the group of people who were slandering her. The silence was immediate. Caroline, holding a glass of wine, stared at her with a mixture of surprise and defiance. "How much did you hear?" Caroline asked without a shred of shame. "Enough," Julia said, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "Enough to know what you really think of me." "And what did you expect?" Caroline retorted, taking a step forward. "That we would pretend this farce of an engagement is acceptable? That we would embrace you, with open arms into the family?" "Farce?" Julia repeated, incredulous. "You think what Raphael and I have is a farce?" "I think you're an opportunist who saw a rich and vulnerable man and decided he was your ticket to a better life," Caroline said bluntly. "And frankly, I think it's pathetic that you don't even have the decency to admit it." "How dare you?" Julia exploded. "You don't know me. You know nothing about me or my life." "I know enough," Caroline shot back. "I know you come from a poor family, that you work a job that barely pays the bills, that you live in a tiny place and suddenly you meet my brother and in 6 months you're engaged. Convenient, don't you think?" "I love Raphael," Julia said, tears threatening to fall. "I love him for who he is, not for the money he has." "Oh yes," Caroline said with sarcasm. "I'm sure the fact that he's rich had absolutely no influence. Do you really expect us to believe that?" "I don't care if you believe it or not," Julia said, raising her voice. "Your opinion doesn't change what I feel for him." It was then that a voice cut through the discussion. "What's going on here?" It was Beatrice, appearing at the entrance to the hall with a severe expression. Behind her, to Julia's horror, was Raphael. "Mother," Caroline began, but Beatrice raised her hand. "Silence," she said, looking from Caroline to Julia. "This is unacceptable. We are hosting guests and you are here causing a scene." "She started it," Caroline said, pointing at Julia. "I didn't start anything," Julia retorted. "I just won't stay quiet while I'm insulted to my face." Raphael finally approached, confused. "Julia, what happened? What did they say?" Julia looked at him, at that face she loved, and suddenly felt the full weight of the situation. He truly had no idea. He was so absorbed in his own world that he hadn't noticed the war happening around him. "Ask your sister," Julia said, her voice breaking. "Ask your family what they think of me." Raphael looked at Caroline, who crossed her arms defensively. "We only told the truth," Caroline stated. "Someone had to be honest with you, Raphael. This woman is not suitable for our family." "Caroline, this is absurd," Raphael said, but there was a hesitation in his voice that Julia noticed immediately. "It's absurd?" Caroline asked. "Look around, Raphael. Look at her and look at us. You come from completely different worlds. She will never fit in here." "I don't need to fit in," Julia said, finding her voice again. "I just need to be loved and respected by the man I'm going to marry. But apparently that's asking too much for this family." "Julia?" Raphael began, but she interrupted him. "You knew?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "You knew your family hated me and you didn't say anything?" "They don't hate you," Raphael protested weakly. "Don't lie to me," Julia said, tears finally falling. "Not now." Beatrice took a step forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Julia, dear, I think we're all a bit emotional. Perhaps it's best for you to rest. Raphael can take you home and we'll talk calmly tomorrow." "No," Julia said, angrily wiping her tears. "I'm not leaving without saying what I need to say." She turned to face the entire room. More people had approached, drawn by the commotion. Julia saw curious faces, some amused, others embarrassed. "You judged me from the moment I arrived," she said, her voice firm now. "You looked at my dress, my car, my profession, and decided I wasn't good enough, but you know what? You are wrong." "Julia," Raphael said, trying to grab her arm, but she pulled away. "I'm talking, Raphael," she said, "and you're going to listen to me. You and this entire family are going to listen to me." She took a deep breath, preparing herself. "You think that because you have money, because you have a last name, you are better than me. But I work hard every day. I save lives. I make a difference in the world. And yes, I don't earn much money doing it, but I do it because I believe in it, because I care. When was the last time anyone in this room did something that wasn't for profit or status?" The silence was absolute now. "And as for love," Julia continued, looking at Raphael, "I chose to be a vet for stray animals because I wanted to help. I chose to live in a small apartment because it's what I can honestly afford. I chose to live a simple life because it's a true life. And I chose to love you because I thought you loved me back. But now I see I was wrong." Raphael was pale. "Julia, this isn't fair." "It's not fair," she repeated with a bitter laugh. "What's not fair is being humiliated all night long while you don't even notice. What's not fair is your family calling me a gold digger when the only thing I ever wanted was to be loved for who I am." "You are loved," Raphael said, desperate. "I love you." "Then why didn't you defend me?" Julia asked, and the question hung in the air like an accusation. "Why did you let them treat me like this?" Raphael had no answer. He looked around at his mother, at his sister, at the guests who watched everything as if it were a spectacle, and in that moment of hesitation, Julia understood everything she needed to know. He wasn't going to defend her. Not really. Because deep down, perhaps a part of him agreed with his family. "I need to get out of here," Julia said, grabbing the purse she had left on a nearby chair. "Julia, wait," Raphael said, finally reacting. But she was already heading for the exit. She crossed the hall, walked past groups of guests who moved aside to let her pass, and stepped out into the illuminated garden. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but she welcomed it. She needed to clear her head. She needed space to think. She took out her phone with trembling hands and opened her contact list. She scrolled past Raphael, her friends, her parents, and then stopped at a name she hadn't called in months. Leonard, her older brother, the person who had always promised to protect her, even when she insisted she didn't need protection. With trembling fingers, she typed a quick message followed by the manor's address. "Leo, I need you to pick me up. Urgent, I'm at the address below." The reply came almost immediately. "On my way. 20 minutes." Julia let out a sigh of relief. She put her phone away and walked to the main gate, ignoring the voices calling after her. Raphael was running behind, pleading for her to wait, to talk. But Julia had already made her decision. She would wait for Leonard outside that gate, away from that family, away from that world that never wanted her. And when her brother arrived, she could finally go home and forget that terrible night had ever happened. At least that's what she thought, because Leonard wouldn't arrive alone. And when he finally appeared, everything those people thought they knew about Julia would be turned upside down. Julia waited outside the gate for exactly 18 minutes. She could hear the activity inside the party, voices arguing, but she didn't care. Raphael had come out after her several times, begging her to come back, to talk, but she refused to look at him. Not now. Maybe never again. It was then she heard the sound of approaching engines. It wasn't just one car, it was a convoy. 3 shiny black SUVs emerged from the dirt road, their headlights cutting through the darkness of the night. Julia felt her heart quicken. She knew those cars. She knew that style. The middle SUV stopped right in front of the gate. The back door opened and Leonard stepped out, adjusting the jacket of his perfectly tailored Italian suit. At 38, he had the demeanor of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and closing multi-million-dollar deals. But when he saw Julia, all that corporate demeanor disappeared. His eyes, so much like hers, filled with concern. "Ju," he said, opening his arms, "come here." Julia couldn't hold back anymore. She ran to her brother and threw herself into his arms, finally letting all the tears fall. "Get me out of here, Leo," she pleaded. "Please." Leonard hugged her tightly, kissing the top of her head as he had when they were children. "I'll get you out of here," he promised. "But first, let's sort something out." He gestured, and 2 security guards got out of the other vehicles. Tall, serious men wearing black suits. One of them approached and spoke quietly with Leonard, who nodded. It was then Raphael appeared, running through the garden, having seen the cars from the window. "Julia, what's going on?" he asked, stopping as he saw Leonard. "Who is this?" Leonard gently released Julia and turned to face Raphael. His expression was one of dangerous calm. "I'm Leonard Santos," he said, extending his hand automatically, more out of corporate courtesy than desire. "Julia's brother." Raphael shook his hand, confused. Julia never mentioned having a brother. "I'm sure there are many things she didn't mention," Leonard said with a tone that made Raphael take a step back. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding," Raphael began. "My family got a little nervous about the engagement, but it's just a matter of time until they get used to it." "Get used to it?" Leonard repeated, and there was something in his voice that made Julia shiver. She knew that tone. It was the tone he used when he was about to destroy someone in a negotiation. It was then that Beatrice, Caroline, and a few more members of the Almeida family appeared in the garden, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" Beatrice asked, looking at the SUVs and the security, guards with growing suspicion. Leonard turned to face them, and Julia saw the exact moment Beatrice began to recognize him. Her eyes widened, her face paled. "You," she whispered. "Good evening, Mrs. Almeida," Leonard said with cold politeness. "I came to pick up my sister." "Sister?" Caroline repeated, looking from Leonard to Julia. "You're her brother." Leonard smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. "I am. Leonard Santos, CEO of Tech Vision America." The silence that followed was absolute. Julia saw their expressions change from confusion to shock to something that looked like terror. "Tech Vision," Maurice repeated, who had stumbled out of the house. "The tech company, the one worth billions?" "That's the one," Leonard confirmed. "I founded it 15 years ago with seed capital. Today we have offices in 12 countries and are the largest tech company in Latin America." Beatrice looked as if she was about to faint. "But then you're the Leonard Santos, the billionaire." "The title is an exaggeration," Leonard said with false modesty. "But yes, I suppose some people call me that." Raphael was in shock, looking at Julia as if seeing her for the first time. "You're his sister? Why did you never tell me?" "Because I asked her not to," Leonard interrupted, taking a step forward. "You see, Julia and I have parents who worked their entire lives to give us an education. My father, the mechanic, saved every penny so I could study. My mother, who works in the bakery, woke up at 4 in the morning every day to bake bread that helped pay for my college. He looked around, making sure everyone was listening. When I became successful, when I built my company and the money started coming in, I realized something. People changed towards me. They treated me differently. Not because I had changed, but because they knew how much I was worth, and I hated that. Leonard turned his gaze to Julia, his face softening. So I made an agreement with my sister when she started college. She would live her own life, build her own career without using my name or my money. I wanted her to be loved and respected for who she is, not for the last name she carries or the bank account she could access. And I accepted, Julia said, finding her voice, because I wanted to be valued for myself, for my work, for my character. Leonard nodded. She lived in student housing in college when she could have had a luxury apartment. She worked part-time jobs when I would have paid all her expenses. She chose to be a vet for stray animals when she could have opened the most expensive clinic in Los Angeles. Caroline was white as a sheet. But why? Why do that? Because unlike you, Leonard said, his voice sharp as a blade, she doesn't need money or status to prove her worth. She already knew who she was, and she wanted to find someone who loved her for that. He turned to Raphael, who looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. My sister met you and believed she had found that someone. She spoke of you with so much love, so much joy. She said you made her feel special, not for being rich or poor, but for being herself. Raphael opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But tonight, Leonard continued, she called me crying, asking me to pick her up. And do you know why? Because your family treated her exactly the way she feared she would be treated. They judged her, humiliated her, called her a gold digger. The irony must be obvious even to you, Leonard said, looking around. You accused my sister of being a gold digger, of being after your money, when in fact she has access to far more wealth than this family will ever have. We didn't know, Beatrice stammered. If we had known... if you had known, Leonard interrupted, his voice full of disdain. If you had known she had money, you would have been kind. You would have been respectful. And that, Mrs. Almeida, says everything about you. He paused, letting the words sink in. Julia didn't need your money. She didn't need this marriage to have a comfortable life. She could have bought this entire manor with a bank transfer if she wanted to, but she chose to live with humility because she believed it would make her a better person. And you, Leonard said, turning to Caroline, you called her pathetic. You mocked her work, her clothes, her life. But I bet you've never done a single day of honest work in your life, have you? Caroline didn't answer, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Leonard turned, his attention to Raphael. And you, the man who claimed to love her. Where were you when your family attacked her? Where were you when your sister humiliated her? You were socializing, oblivious, allowing the woman you loved to be torn apart. I didn't know, Raphael said, his voice breaking. Julia, I swear I didn't know what was happening. You should have known, Julia said, finally speaking. If you truly loved me, you would have noticed. You would have seen that I was suffering, but you didn't see because you didn't want to see. Tears streamed down Raphael's face now. Please, Ju, give me a chance. Let's talk. Fix this. There's nothing to fix, Julia said, taking the engagement ring off her finger. This engagement is over. She placed the ring in Raphael's hand, who held it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Julia, please, he pleaded. But Leonard was already guiding his sister to the SUV. He stopped at the door and turned one last time to the Almeida family. You had the chance to meet an extraordinary person, he said. A woman who dedicates her life to saving animals, who chooses kindness over comfort, who values love above money. And you threw that chance away because you were too arrogant to see beyond your own superficial expectations. He got into the car next to Julia, and before closing the door, he said one last thing. I hope the regret you will feel is proportional to the cruelty you displayed today. The door closed. The SUVs started their engines and began to drive away, leaving the Almeida family in shocked silence in the illuminated garden. Inside the car, Julia finally allowed herself to break down completely. Leonard pulled her into his arms as she sobbed. I'm sorry, Leo, she said through tears. I'm sorry for putting you in this situation. You don't have to apologize for anything, he said, kissing her forehead. Those people don't even deserve to breathe the same air as you. I really loved him, Julia confessed. I thought he was different. I know, Leonard said softly, but sometimes we find out that the people we love aren't who we thought they were, and it's okay to hurt because of that. Julia nestled against her brother, emotionally and physically exhausted. As the car drove down the dark road, she looked out, the back window one last time, watching the lights of St. Helens Manor disappear in the distance. It was the end of a chapter in her life, painful, humiliating, but necessary. And although her heart was broken, a part of her knew she was making the right choice. Because true love shouldn't need defending, it shouldn't come with conditions, and it certainly shouldn't make someone feel less than they truly are. Julia closed her eyes, letting the tears fall one last time, and she promised herself that she would never again allow anyone to make her feel inadequate for being exactly who she chose to be. 3 months passed since that night at St. Helens Manor, 3 months of healing, reflection, and rediscovery. Julia woke up to the sound of her alarm clock at 6 in the morning, as she did every day. She stretched in the bed of the apartment she had finally allowed Leonard to help her buy. It wasn't huge, but it had 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking the park, and most importantly, it was hers. She got up and made coffee, enjoying the morning silence. In the first few days after the breakup, the silence frightened her. It left her alone with her thoughts, with the memories of Raphael and the humiliation she had suffered. But now, 3 months later, silence was her friend. It was space to grow. Her phone vibrated on the kitchen table. A message from Leonard. "Good morning, sis. Don't forget today's the day. You got this, love you." Julia smiled. Today was the grand opening. After weeks of conversations, planning, and brutal honesty with herself about what she truly wanted from life, Julia had made a decision. She would open her own veterinary clinic, not a luxury clinic for rich, people's pets, but a place that would serve both stray animals and pets from families who needed affordable prices. A place that reflected her values. Leonard offered the initial capital, but Julia insisted on making it a proper investment, with contracts and payment terms. It wasn't charity. It was a business partnership between siblings who respected each other. She dressed calmly. Jeans, a simple white shirt, and her lab coat with the new embroidered logo. Hope Clinic. The name had been her mother's idea. "Where there is love for animals, there is hope for humanity," she had said when Julia called to tell her the plans. She arrived at the clinic at 7:30. The building was in a middle-class neighborhood, close enough to downtown to be accessible, but with parking and enough space for future expansion. The facade was immaculate, painted white and light blue with large windows that let in natural light. Inside, her team was already working. 3 veterinarians she had personally chosen, 2 technicians, and a receptionist named Amanda, who had a smile that lit up the room. "Good morning, Dr. Julia," Amanda said, waving excitedly. "We already have 5 appointments for today and 3 emergency cases. That called last night." "Great," Julia said, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Let's get started." The morning passed in a whirlwind. A golden retriever with digestive issues, a Persian cat that needed vaccinations, a rescued stray with an injured paw. Each case received the same attention, the same care, regardless of how much the owner could pay. It was in the middle of the afternoon that something unexpected happened. Julia was finishing a minor surgery on a puppy when Amanda knocked on the office door. "Doctor, there's someone here who wants to speak with you," she said with a strange expression. "He said it's important." "Tell him to wait a few minutes," Julia replied, concentrating on closing the stitches. "He said it's about Raphael Almeida." Julia's hands paused for a second. She took a deep breath and continued her work. She finished the suture, cleaned the area, and instructed the technician on post-operative care. Only then did she go to see who was at the reception. It was a middle-aged man, wearing a suit and tie, with a leather briefcase in his hand. He had the demeanor of a lawyer. "Dr. Julia Santos?" he asked, standing up as she approached. "That's me," Julia replied, crossing her arms. "And you are?" "My name is Robert Fernandez. I'm the Almeida family lawyer," he said, extending a card that Julia didn't take. "I'm here at Mr. Raphael Almeida's request." Julia felt her stomach tighten. "I have nothing to discuss about Raphael. Please," he pleaded, "just a moment of your time. I promise not to take long." Julia hesitated, but curiosity won. She led him to her private office and closed the door. "Speak," she said, remaining standing while he sat down. Robert opened the briefcase and took out some documents. "Mr. Almeida asked me to deliver this to you. It's a letter and some documents he believes you should see." Julia took the envelope with reluctance. Inside was a handwritten letter on fine paper. She immediately recognized Raphael's handwriting. She began to read. "Julia, I know I don't have the right to write to you. I know I hurt you in a way that words cannot mend, but I need you to know some things. Ever since you left, I haven't been able to think about anything else but that night. I replayed every moment, every conversation, and realized with horror that you were right. I didn't defend you, I was a coward. I chose my comfort zone instead of fighting for the person I loved. I broke with my family, not completely, because they are still my blood, but I made it clear that their behavior was unacceptable. My mother tried to apologize, but I know apologies don't change what happened. Caroline is in therapy, trying to understand why she treats people the way she does. I'm also in therapy. I realize now that I grew up in a bubble of privilege that left me blind to many things, to the way my family treats others, to my own prejudices that I didn't even know existed. I'm not writing to ask for another chance. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing to say that you were right about everything, and to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not being the man you deserved. I'm sorry for not protecting you when I should have. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever met. Your work, your kindness, your strength. I hope you find someone who sees that and fights for you the way I should have fought. With love and regret, Raphael." Julia finished reading with moist eyes. She folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. "He asked me to say that he doesn't expect a reply," Robert continued. "But there was also this." He handed her another document. It was a donation, a substantial amount of money donated to Hope Clinic in Raphael Almeida's name. "I can't accept this," Julia said immediately. "He said you would say that," Robert replied with a small smile. "That's why he included an additional letter." She opened the second, shorter letter. "Julia, please accept this. Not as an attempt to buy your forgiveness, but as recognition of the incredible work you do. You taught me that true value lies in how we treat the most vulnerable. Let me honor that lesson by helping the animals you save. Not for me, for them." Julia was silent for a long moment. Finally, she looked at Robert. "Tell him I accept the donation, but under one condition." "Which is?" Robert asked. "That it be anonymous. I don't want his name associated with the clinic. If he truly wants to help, let it be for the right reasons, not to feel better about what happened." Robert nodded. "I'll convey the message." After he left, Julia stood alone in her office, holding the letters. A part of her wanted to hate Raphael, wanted to remain hurt. But honestly, she only felt a deep sadness for what could have been and wasn't. She put the letters in a drawer and returned to work. She had animals waiting. It was at the end of the day, when she was closing the clinic, that she met Theo. He appeared at the door 5 minutes before closing time, carrying a cardboard box with extreme care. He was tall, with slightly disheveled dark hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and simple but clean clothes. "Sorry about the time," he said, out of breath. "I found this cat in the street. I think she was hit by a car. Please, she needs help." Julia immediately went into professional mode. "Bring her in, quickly." They took the cat to the emergency room. Julia examined her quickly. Broken hind leg, some cuts, but nothing that couldn't be treated. She worked for 40 minutes, stabilizing the cat, taking x-rays, immobilizing the leg. The entire time, Theo stood by, watching with genuine concern. "She's going to be fine," Julia said finally, wiping her hands. "Her leg will heal. She'll limp a little, but she'll have a normal life." Theo let out a sigh of relief. "Thank goodness. How much do I owe?" Julia looked at him, at the way his clothes were simple but well kept, at the old cell phone he carried, at the real concern in his eyes for an animal that wasn't even his. "This time it's on the house," she said. "You saved her life. It's the least I can do." Theo's eyes filled with tears. "Seriously? I can pay. I can pay in installments if I need to." "You don't need to," Julia said, smiling, "but she'll need post-operative care. Can you take care of her, or do you know someone who can?" "I can," Theo said immediately. "I live alone, but I have space and time. I work from home." "Perfect," Julia said. "Then I'll prepare the instructions and you can take her home tomorrow." While preparing the prescriptions and instructions, they talked. Theo was a literature teacher at a public school. He was on his way home when he saw the cat in the street. "I couldn't leave her there," he explained. "Even knowing I can barely pay my own bills, I couldn't just pass by." Julia smiled. "I understand completely. That's exactly how I feel." They talked for a few more minutes about work, about the difficulty of being a teacher in a public school, about the love for helping others even when it's difficult. When Theo finally left, promising to return the next day, Julia realized she was smiling, a true smile, the kind she hadn't felt in months. Maybe, just maybe, good things could still happen. As she closed the clinic and walked to her car, Julia looked at the starry sky and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It wasn't complete happiness yet. The wounds from 3 months ago still hurt sometimes, but it was the beginning, a new beginning. And she was ready for it. 6 months after the clinic's opening, Julia was sitting in a simple cafe in Silver Lake, waiting for Theo. They had agreed to meet there after he finished his classes. The last few months had been transformative. Hope Clinic was thriving, treating dozens of animals a week. Julia had hired 2 more veterinarians and extended operating hours. More importantly than the numbers, she saw the difference she was making. Families who couldn't afford treatment for their pets now had options. Stray animals were rescued, treated, and put up for adoption. And there was Theo. What started as a friendship when he returned to pick up the cat he had rescued turned into something more. Long conversations about literature and animals, walks in the park on weekends, simple dinners in modest restaurants where they could talk for hours without noticing the time pass. Theo was different from Raphael in every way. Where Raphael was polished and reserved, Theo was authentic and expressive. Where Raphael lived in a world of luxury and privilege, Theo had chosen a life dedicated to education, earning little but making a difference. And most importantly, Theo saw her, truly saw who she was. "Julia, sorry I'm late," Theo said, arriving out of breath and with a wide smile. "I had a meeting with a student's parents that ran long." "It's okay," Julia said, standing up to hug him. "How was the meeting?" Theo sat down, ordering a simple coffee from the waiter. "Good, actually. The boy was struggling with math, so I managed to convince his parents to let him get free tutoring at school. It will make all the difference." Julia smiled, observing the enthusiasm in his eyes. "You really love what you do, don't you?" "I do," Theo replied, taking her hand across the table. "Just like you love saving animals. I think that's why we understand each other so well. We know there are more important things in life than money." Julia squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of gratitude for having found him. They talked about their day, about Theo's students and Julia's patients. They laughed at funny stories, shared concerns. It was simple, natural, right. When they finished their coffee, Theo invited her for a walk. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. "There's something I need to tell you," Theo said as they walked hand in hand. Julia looked at him, curious. "What is it?" Theo took a deep breath. "I know it's still early. I know you've been through a lot, but I love you, Julia. I love you for the way you care for abandoned animals. I love you for your strength, for your kindness. I love you for choosing to do what's right even when it's difficult." Julia felt her heart quicken. "I'm not proposing to you," Theo continued quickly. "Not yet. But I want you to know that when the day comes, when you're ready, I'll be here. I'll be by your side, and I'll fight for you whenever you need me to, because you deserve someone who fights." Tears streamed down Julia's face now. "I love you too," she whispered, "more than I thought I could love again." They kissed there in the middle of the dance floor, while the music played softly in the background. And Julia knew with absolute certainty that she had found something real. The following months were the happiest of Julia's life. The clinic continued to grow. Henry and his foundation became partners, providing resources to expand services. Julia was able to hire more staff, buy better equipment, help even more animals. Theo was always present, not in a suffocating way, but in a constant way, supporting her decisions, celebrating her victories, comforting her on difficult days. They spent weekends together, cooking at home, watching movies, talking about everything and nothing. Leonard adored Theo. "Finally, someone who deserves you," he said when he first met him. "And this time I won't have to pick you up crying from any party, right?" Julia laughed. "No, not this time." A year after meeting Theo, Julia was closing the clinic when she received an unexpected call. It was Raphael. She hesitated but answered. "Julia," he said, his voice hesitant. "I know I don't have the right to call, but I need to tell you something." "What is it?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "I'm engaged," he said, "to an amazing woman I met in therapy. She taught me a lot about myself. And I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me that night." Julia listened in silence. "You were right," Raphael continued, "about everything, about my family, about my cowardice, about what really matters. And I wanted to thank you for that, for being strong enough to leave, for having forced me to grow." "I'm happy for you, Raphael," Julia said honestly. "Truly." "And you?" he asked. "Are you happy?" Julia looked around the clinic. She saw the photos of animals she had saved on the walls. She thought of Theo waiting for her at home with dinner ready. She thought of the life she had built, the choices she had made. "I am," she replied. "Very happy." "That's good," Raphael said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "You always deserved that." After they hung up, Julia stood in the empty reception for a moment. She thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the humiliation, the breakup, and how it had all led her to this point, to Theo, to the clinic, to the life she truly wanted. Sometimes she realized things need to break completely for us to rebuild them the right way. 2 years after opening Hope Clinic on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Theo took Julia back to the same cafe where they had their first date. He had a nervous smile on his face, and Julia immediately knew what was coming. He knelt there in the middle of the simple cafe with a modest but beautiful ring. "Julia Santos," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You taught me that true value isn't in money or status, but in kindness and integrity. You taught me that love means being present, fighting, defending, and I promise to do that every day for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" Julia looked at that man who had chosen her every day, who had been by her side in difficult moments and celebrated every victory, who loved her not despite her choices, but because of them. "Yes," she said, tears of happiness falling freely. 1,000 times yes. When they kissed, applause erupted in the cafe. People who didn't even know them celebrated with them, touched by the simplicity and authenticity of the moment. And Julia knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had always been looking for. Not wealth, not status, but true love, genuine respect, a partnership of equals. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard in Bakersfield. Leonard was the best man, emotional. Her parents cried with joy. Theo's fellow teachers and Julia's clinic staff formed the small crowd of guests. There was no opulence, there was no ostentation, but there was love. True love, the kind that doesn't need defending because it's already complete in itself. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, soft music playing in the background, Julia rested her head on Theo's chest and sighed contentedly. "Happy?" he asked, kissing her hair. "More than I ever imagined I could be," she replied. And it was true. The journey had been painful, the lessons difficult, but they had brought her to this point, to this moment, to this man, to this life. A life built not on money or a family name, but on conscious choices, on kindness, on integrity, on true love. And as the sun set over the garden, painting the sky with colors of gold and rose, Julia Santos, now Julia Santos Ferreira, knew that she had finally found her place, not in a world of wealth and privilege, but in a world of purpose and true love. A world where being who you choose to be is more valuable than any fortune, where being loved for your essence is the greatest treasure, and where fighting for what's right even when it's difficult always pays off in the end. The end of the story. If Julia's journey touched your heart, you're not alone. We all face moments when we are judged by appearances, when our true worth is questioned. But as Julia discovered, what truly matters is not the approval of others, but the authenticity of our choices and the quality of the people we choose to have by our side. This story reminds us that true love doesn't demand changes, doesn't impose conditions, and always fights for us when we need it. It reminds us that success isn't measured in material wealth, but in the positive impact we leave on the world. And it reminds us that sometimes the doors that close in our lives are blessings in disguise that lead us to where we truly belong. If you identified with Julia's strength, if you were thrilled by the unexpected twist, or if you were moved by the ending she truly deserved, like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next soul-stirring stories that make us reflect on what truly matters in life. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever been in a situation where you were judged unfairly? How did you overcome it? Your story might inspire others. Remember, you are more than the circumstances of your birth, more than your bank account, more than the approval of others. You are the sum of your choices, your kindness, your character. And that, as Julia proved, is what truly matters. Until the next story, keep believing in true love and the power of authenticity.